Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 256. This episode will air on January 12th. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don, you just got out of a 360 hunting blind, hunting over your food plots with snow on the ground. The weather's moved in. Did you see a pile of deer tonight?
I seen a bunch of them. They didn't move till right before dark, but about the last 30 minutes, deer just started popping out everywhere, hitting mainly the real world soybeans. But probably seen 10 or 12 bucks and I don't know, 30, 35 total deer. Yeah.
What's the weather been like that up here the last week? We got hit pretty hard, I think, across the Midwest with a winter storm warning, and then there's areas even down into Alabama that's getting snow right now. So what did it do at your house?
Sunday and Monday morning, we had a bunch of snow, mainly on Sunday. Monday afternoon, I left and went to Kentucky, to western Kentucky, and was there Tuesday and Wednesday down around Russellville looking at a couple properties, and then came home Wednesday night. And, man, I wanted to look at properties Friday and Saturday, but this weather coming in, it just didn't work out. So I went hunting instead and probably do the same thing tomorrow. And I'll tell you, I was sitting there this afternoon. It was like I'm thinking, man, I should just retire from consulting. I haven't hunted the late season in so many years. At least consistently. I might get to go a couple times, but I'm usually on the road consulting, and I was just sitting there enjoying the snow coming down and all the different critters I was seeing. I seen coyotes. I watched a hawk catch a little Tweety bird, and just all kinds of stuff. And time flew by. You know, sometimes you get in a stand and it seems like time drags as you're waiting for, sunset and that magic hour when the deer start moving. But that wasn't like that at all today. It's just so peaceful out there that I kind of miss it and look forward to going again tomorrow. But I'm wondering if I ought to just retire and do that all winter long.
Well, you keep saying you're going to slow down. We'll see if it actually happens one day or not.
Next year. It's next year, Terry. Always next year.
Always next year. So we got, I think it's hard to tell how much snow we got. Halfway through the snowstorm, probably about the 6 to 8 inch mark, we got ice. So the ice packed down the snow, and then we got more snow on top of it. And then it's snowing out there right now. I think the snow you had earlier today is here right now. So I don't know. We haven't had this big of a snow in, I can't even tell you how long. It's been years since we've had this big of snow.
Hey, I haven't touched a snow shovel in 3 winters. And then the other day, Monday before I left to head to Kentucky, I spent 4 hours on the skid loader moving snow. And it was so bad that I ordered a snow blower for my skid loader. And next time, after it gets here, I'll be able to cut that in half, I believe.
It'll probably never snow again.
That's
now
what
that
I'm
you
hoping.
Ordered that.
I hope that snowblower sits in my shed and never sees snow.
Oh shoot! So let's talk about real quick. I want to talk a little bit before we get to the Osseo break about this news from the Illinois DNR and CWD. That's a pretty hot topic that just happened. But real quick, walk us through what's going on physiological, the health-wise of deer right now. So there's been snow on the ground for over a week and not a lot of food out there. What's going on with these deer's bodies? Is this one of those things where we could see the testosterone drop earlier than normal, and when the snow melts, we got sheds in the field, or what?
Well, it's possible. I don't think they're stressed that much yet, but at least at my place, because there's plenty of food. But I do think that there's going to be situations where the deer are stressed because, with a foot of snow on the ground, it's hard for those deer to find the food down under it. And if they do, they got to work for it. They got to paw back the snow and get to it. But, and the deer just seem to be piling on the food sources. I talked to one of the guys up in northern Indiana this week, and they said there was a bean field, a double crop bean field that the guy never harvested because the beans just didn't amount to much. They got about 8 inches tall, but they did put pods on. And he said there was 93 deer in that field one evening this week. So they're piled onto the food sources. It just depends on how long this hangs on as to, how bad it's going to be. But I don't expect them to start dropping sheds this week or anything.
Yeah.
But, if we see 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of this, then that's a whole different story.
I got you. All right, well, let's switch gears. Tell me a little bit about, some people have been texting us some screenshots, kind of some latest news from the Illinois DNR with CWD management. I haven't even read it yet, but you said that you got a couple screenshots of it. What's going on?
Well, apparently Illinois DNR has changed or revised their CWD policy. So it used to be that if a positive case of CWD was found in Illinois, they would send sharpshooters in, and for I think it's 5 years. I may be wrong, so don't hold me to that. But for a certain period of time, it's a number of years, within a 2-mile radius of where that deer was found, they tried to kill every deer, and they kept that up for a period of years. And they would use bait piles, and they would do it at night with thermal scopes or whatever. But that was their policy, and they thought it was cutting edge, and other states looked up to them and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure that there's some people that did think that was a great idea, but there was a lot of people that did not. Dr. James Kroll was one that just totally or continually hammered them on it, and there was others. And so it's kind of like the scientific community is kind of divided on that approach anyway, and a lot of other aspects of the whole CWD situation. But apparently DNR is going to do away with their sharpshooting program, and they're going to only use hunters to, kill extra deer in CWD areas. And I think the point that needs to be made is that the deer hunters need to take it upon themselves to be good stewards of this resource. And just because DNR opens a CWD season and says, have at it, shoot every deer you see without limit, that doesn't mean that as ethical sportsmen, we need to be out there doing it. And, good game management starts with the DNR, obviously, of whatever state, but it ultimately falls into the lap of hunters. We're the ones that control our trigger finger. We can shoot or not shoot. We make the ultimate decision. And if you're in a situation where, the deer herd is just not where you think it should be, why in the world would you go out there and shoot a bunch of extra deer? It's the same way with EHD. You have a big EHD outbreak, and you should take it upon yourself to pull back on the harvest. Don't be out there shooting extra does. I don't think there's any deer hunter today that depends on venison to stay alive. They may live on venison because they choose to, but they don't have to live on venison to stay alive. So, we need to just take matters into our own hands and, be the good game managers and stewards of the resources that we should be.
Well, I think the people that are managing their properties have the best intelligence of what's going on in their property. The year that you have an EHD breakout, you might not want to kill that second buck, to fill that second buck tag, Same goes with this. I think that the DNR can start the process, which I think it's good news that they're not doing the sharpshooters. I think that's a positive thing, but I hope it just doesn't empower people to just go and start whacking and stacking.
Well, there's no doubt it's a good thing. My question would be, what's the reason for the change? And my guess is it's funding. I think they got a lot of federal funding to pay for these sharpshooters, and that funding is hopefully dried up and will never come back. And that's why it was curtailed. It wasn't a management decision. It was a money decision, would be my guess. And again, I could be wrong, so don't hold me to it. But, when you just read between the lines and knowing what I know about the way that the Illinois government is run, not just the DNR, but the entire Illinois government, they love spending money. They love spending money on stupid things, and they love getting that federal money. And I'm just going to guess the money train dried up, and that's why they switched policy.
It's your gut feeling, huh?
That's my gut feeling.
Gut feeling.
I'll say that we do have a question coming up later, a submitted question about management and specifically of my property in terms of managing the deer herd. So we're going to get back on this topic, a little bit later in the podcast.
All right. I'm gonna tee up for all of our guys that are playing their game tonight. I'm gonna tee up another topic for you before the Ossia break and before we come back for the Higgins hot seat segment. Neighbors shooting bucks they agreed to pass. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I talk to a lot of deer hunters. I mean, every day, multiple deer hunters through various means. It's either text or emails or consulting or in person somewhere, whatever. And I keep hearing the same theme over and over. And I heard it a couple times this week. And that is guys letting bucks walk because the neighbors agreed to let them walk too. And I can't tell you how many times I've been to a client's place and they say, here's the buck that was on my place this fall. Me and my neighbor both agreed to let him walk. And then what do you think happens? The neighbor shoots him. And a lot of times it's guys have let the buck walk themselves several times. And the first time he steps in front of the neighbor, he gets hammered. And talking to a friend in Indiana this week who had it happen, very upset. And I don't blame him because the buck in question was a fantastic 3-year-old that had the potential to be really special in an area where those kind of deer don't come along that often. And the neighbor ends up killing it after the neighbor agreed not to.
Plans don't always come together.
Well, it's something that I hear over and over and over.
People aren't disciplined to stay with their goal.
No.
As the season winds down and goes, these people think that they got to kill something for whatever reasons. I'm sure the reason's different for a bunch of people, but it's that pressure, whether it's social media or wanting to fill the tag or whatever. They just that original goal that they set at the beginning of the year, just they can't hold to it.
Well, I've said it many times, big deer make people do stupid things. And I would just hope that there's more people out there that when they give someone their word that they're going to do something or not going to do something, that sticking to their word means a whole lot more than a set of antlers on the wall. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who, once that deer walks out in front of them, their integrity, their word, their character means less than that deer on the wall. And I threw that out there because twice this week I've heard stories, and I keep hearing them, all the time as I'm traveling, especially with my consulting clients. And, I don't know the advice to give to people. I mean, if your neighbor gives you his word, then what can you do but trust him until he proves that his word is worthless?
But at the same time, I get the frustration there, but if I'm a landowner and I say I'm going to pass it and the neighbor says he's not going to pass it, I'm still going to pass it. I'm not going to just shoot it because the neighbor's going to shoot it if it doesn't meet my goal. Mm-hmm. So it really just shouldn't change anything you do. It's just the frustration level of trying to be on the same page with a plan and people not holding up their end of the deal.
Well, it's the honesty and integrity of the person in question. And I know the gentleman I was talking to in Indiana this week, he said, I'll never have a conversation with this neighbor again. He says, I can't believe anything he says. We were sharing all our trail camera pictures. There was no secret bucks that I was trying to hide from him or anything. And he just proved to me that he cannot be trusted. And I totally get it. I mean, I'm willing to work with neighbors too, but when they can't be trusted any longer, why would you share information with them?
They can know about a buck when it's in the back of the truck, right?
Yep.
All right, well, let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from our friends at Osseo. Make sure you're following them and the Mission Whitetail podcast with Joe Miles. He had Bobby Worthington on earlier this week, so make sure you check that out, and we'll be right back.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
Okay, well, we're back with the Higgins Hot Seat segment of the podcast brought to you by 360 Blinds. And as we mentioned in the first episode that we've done this on last week, Don does not know what I'm going to pick his brain on. And sometimes they're going to be a little lighthearted. Sometimes they're going to be serious. Sometimes it might be poking the bear just to make him get his blood pressure going up. But this is a question I'm curious. I've known you for, good grief, 20 years now, and I don't even know the answer to this question. What superstitions do you have when you go to the woods? So some people always use the same arrow in their quiver. Some people switch arrows when they haven't seen anything or had a bad hunt. Do you have any superstitions when you go to the stand or any rituals that you like to do when you go hunting every night?
I don't. I don't know. I'm sitting here trying to think. I don't have any ritual. My ritual is play in the wind. I mean, I won't even leave the house until I know which way the wind is going, and I will never hunt a stand when the wind's wrong. I guess that's the closest thing that I can think of to a ritual, is that I always know which way the wind's blowing when I'm hunting.
So when you get to the stand and you pull that arrow out of the quiver, is it always the same arrow every time?
Pretty much, yeah. It's the first one at the back of the quiver, but
you don't rotate them. Don't have a lucky one. Don't paint on it with a marker.
Nope.
You're past that point, huh?
Yeah.
I was really expecting to hear like you brushed your teeth 3 times, or you put your socks on inside out, or wore dirty Separtech underwear or something before you went out every night. I was really expecting to hear something a little bit more juicy.
No, I'm sitting here trying to think of any weird thing that I do, and outside of, I'm a stickler about the wind, and other than that, I mean, sometimes, I will rely on past experience to tell me where to hunt, but I don't know if that's some ritual or what you're looking for. But if I had a good, like say it's mid-October and we got a wind out of the west, I'll think of places where I had good success in mid-October with a west wind, and I may select that spot over another one. But I don't think that's, a ritual. I just think that's smart hunting.
Well, if you have a superstition or a ritual, comment down below if you're watching on YouTube on what it is. And you don't have to feel silly, because I have one. I pick a different arrow in the quiver. I go down the line every single hunt. So I rotate down my quiver every single time and rotate around. So I don't know why I do it. I don't think it brings me good luck. It's just something to do, other than making little Debbie reels when I'm in the tree stand all fall.
Well, whatever you're doing, it's working.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about January 24th. We're going to be up in Mount Hope, Ohio. And I'm going to talk about the schedule just a little bit, and then you can talk about the content of what you're talking about. So the doors are going to open fairly early. There's going to be some vendors there, but the meal's going to be provided. It's going to be a donation meal with the proceeds going to Lester's Feet. And then I'm going to get up and give an update about Lester's Feet, and then you're going to give this presentation we've been talking about for the last couple months. I think this is the first time you're going to give it in public. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to share things that I've never really talked about, at least in a setting like this. I'll just, if you want to know the Don Higgins journey, and what God has done with a simple country boy, and I think there'll be some things to take away that everybody will leave with something to think about and consider. And yeah, I'm approaching this with the angle that this region has been so good to me over the years. Lots of friends there. There'll be a lot of people that I've known, met at shows, whatever, many times over the last 20, 25 years that I feel like I should give something back. I'm not going to get up there and try to sell you a bag of seed or try to get you to hire me to consult on your property. It's going to be a totally different, I don't even call it a seminar. A speech is probably not right either. Sermon, maybe. We'll call it a sermon. It's going to be a different sermon than you've ever heard before from me. And that includes, on some of the videos that I put out on YouTube or social media. So, hopefully people will enjoy it. If they don't, after it's over, you and I are going to do a live Chasing Giants podcast where they can ask questions and they can hammer me.
The Q&A to wrap up the evening will actually be a live podcast. So if you're around central northern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, Mount Hope, Ohio, at JB's Feed. It's at the, what do they call it? The Mount Hope Auction something?
Mount Hope Event Center, I think.
Event Center. The number there is 330-893-3684. And then we get a couple-week break before we go back to the Shipshewana show and the Midwest Sportsman's Classic. And we've been getting a lot of messages about that show as well. Derek's going to be posting all of the times for that. We don't know them yet. So hopefully those will be on the internet quickly, and we can share when all of those events for the Winsel brothers, Bobby Worthington, Al Foster, Joe Miles, and yourself, that's going to be at that show. I've heard a bunch of people are traveling in from out of town to come to this thing, so we really appreciate the support on that. But hope we see everybody in Mount Hope, Ohio on January 24th. That's going to be a fun night. I bet there was, 600-800 people there 2 years ago when we did this?
There was several hundred, and
it was a big crowd.
Yeah, so we look forward to it.
All right. Well, with that, we actually have an extra question tonight, so I'm going to put this up. Our questions are brought to you by Midwest Land Group. Make sure you check them out if you're looking for recreational properties or a career. They need to find some real estate agents and managing partners in states that they're expanding into. So look up them on the internet or get in touch with us and we'll connect you with their
Ever
HR
had
department.
A terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
All right, this one comes from Mike Gruber from Mosinee, Wisconsin. It says, hi, Don and Terry. Thanks for all the info you both provide each week on the podcast and through the Whitetail Master Academy. I've been a long-time listener. My first question you had on the podcast was way back on episode 96 about logging a new property. We followed your advice and clear-cut the aspen half of the property and heavily cut the other half, just leaving a few oaks for acorns, seed trees, and the heavy spruce areas with ground cover for winter cover. We also converted the rented ag area into 8 acres of NutriCrave, Gentoo, beans, Deadly Dozen, clover rotation to create one big feeding area. We went from hardly being able to find a deer track while walking the property that first winter with different foresters and loggers to now we have well over a dozen bucks on the property and have had 150-inch plus bucks on the property each year since the logging and zero intrusion into the cover. We've had a buck on the property for 3 years now He summers on a refuge across the highway and shows up periodically late October each year, and by late November he stays on ours through spring for the cover and food. But in the last 2 years, even though I've flooded the property with cams and he beds on us regularly, I've only had 2 daylight pictures of him in 2 years. My question is, have you ever had a deer like this that you thought might be unkillable late season due to lack of stress from a mild winter with no snow or limited cold temps like we've had in Wisconsin the last 2 years, and abundant available food that allows him to keep showing up just after dark? Mike, your question reminds me of a buck that I did shoot on this property in the late season back about 2010, I believe it was. So it's been 15 years ago now. Hunted the buck all through the fall. I would get his pictures at night, but not during the day. I seen him from stand a couple of times during the rut. Each time was in the afternoon. He would stand up in his bed in the switchgrass on my farm, and I would think, here he comes. You know, he'd stand up half hour before dark. I think this is the evening I'm going to get a shot at him. But that deer would never move more than about 10 feet. He would just stand up from his bed and just stand there until it was pitch black. Then we got a brutal cold spell with snow, kind of like what we've got now, but even colder than what we've got now. And I seen that buck 3 afternoon hunts in a row, ended up shooting him in his bed, walking into the stand on the 3rd hunt. That buck, until that brutal cold spell hit, he was pretty much nocturnal. And, you know, I talk a lot about these mature bucks each having different personalities, and this is just a perfect example, as is the buck that you've described. There's some of them, it just takes some extreme conditions to get them on their feet in daylight. Usually really cold weather and a good food source will do it. But if you don't get that, then, you know, you're just kind of at the mercy of Mother Nature. So the best you can do is have the prime food sources like you've got, and then just hope for that brutal cold weather, and then you've got a chance.
Okay.
The next one comes from Heath from Freetown, Indiana. It says, Don, I've heard you mention weather events coinciding with buck shedding. In southern Indiana, we just experienced a huge snowstorm and forecasted prolonged, brutal cold temps coming up. This hasn't happened to us for a lot of years. Do you think this will contribute to some stress and cause some shedding? P.S. Your thoughts on Hillary Clinton receiving the Congressional Medal of Freedom from O. Biden? Well, which one do we want to start with there?
We've kind of already talked about the shedding of bucks a little bit, but you know, I think you know, if I'm gonna change his question a little bit. If the temperature was 15, 20 degrees colder than what it is now, would that make it different?
Yeah, it definitely would. The other thing is, I've shared this story before too, a few times on the podcast, but it was back about 2010 or so. There was a buck I ended up shooting in 2012, but a year or two before that, we got just a terrible ice storm in January. And I mean, that ice stayed on everything for probably 10 days or more. You know, a lot of times you get that ice storm and a day or two later, sun comes out and melts it and it just all falls off the limbs of the trees and everything. But, you know, this stuff was so bad that the stalks of the soybeans in my food plot, they were the size of, you know, like a broom handle with ice around them. All the pods, you know, were encrusted in ice, and it stayed that way for a week to 10 days. And I believe that the majority of the bucks that winter all shed their antlers within about a week period. Now, they all obviously didn't, but the majority of them. And I went in that spring into bedding areas, and the deer really, they weren't even coming out into the food plots. They were just staying in the cover, because literally everything was just a solid sheet of ice and encrusted in ice. You know, the fences, for example, had the ice on the wire, and it was just, it just stayed. It didn't melt. So I went in the spring, and there was just two distinct bedding areas on my farm, and it was just like hunting Easter eggs as a kid. It's just like, there's one with these shed antlers. And that was probably my best day ever hunting shed antlers. And I think I found 17 that day. And there's a place on my farm where I did a timber harvest and then a TSI cut, real heavy. And I show these slides a lot. And it's only a little 5-acre woodlot. And I've talked a lot about how before I did that, there was no deer utilizing that little 5-acre woodlot. It was just way too open. There's surrounded by wide open cover, and there was just no good tree species, no reason for the deer to be in there. Then we cut it really hard. I told the logger, take every tree you want. You cannot possibly make me mad. If I come back and every tree's gone, I'm not going to be mad. Take every one you want. And he did that. And when he got done, I went in with my help, had the tree business at the time. So we was kind of shut down for the winter, but we went in there for 2 or 3 days with chainsaws, and we just annihilated the trees that were left. We either cut them or we girdled them to kill them all. And then one summer, that place just exploded with growth, with that sunlight getting in there around those fallen trees and such. That next winter would have been the winter we had that bad ice storm. And I went into that little 5-acre woodlot where I had never, ever found a shed antler, and I found 8 of them in there. That's more than 1 per acre. And we're not at those conditions right now, or I haven't seen them, not around me. And I just traveled, through southern Indiana on my way to Kentucky this week. And yeah, there was some ice down there, but nothing like what I'm talking about, because that ice on my return trip home, it was falling off of the trees and such. It wasn't hanging on. But I don't think we've had anything yet that's stressing the deer out enough to make them shed significantly early. Now, if this keeps on, we're in early January. It's only we're recording this on the 10th. We still got 3 weeks of January left. So if this type of weather just keeps hanging on, we just keep getting pounded with snow and cold temperatures, yeah, in early February, we could be talking about bucks shedding significantly, but I just don't think we're at that point yet.
Yeah. Second part of his question, what do you think about the little participation award that Miss Clinton got?
Well, if those of you that follow me on social media, Terry's laughing because he knows I'm trying to be politically correct here, and I'm searching for my words. But if you follow me on social media, right after Trump won the election, I made a post, and you can go back and check it on my Facebook. Go back and look, and I said, the Democrats are so evil that they will burn the house down on the way out the door. And I don't think we've seen the last from this administration of these shady dealings. The whole Hillary thing, yeah, it's a joke, but look what else he's done. They were selling off pieces of steel for the wall, the southern wall down on the Mexico border. Those big chunks of steel, as long as a semi bed that they were sticking in the ground, to make that big steel wall. Biden was selling those off, and I heard for $5 a piece. And just scrap steel, they got to be worth way more than that. And they was having semis trucking these things out. And these people are pure evil. And the fact that any clear-thinking American is still supporting the Democrats is just unfathomable to me. And I'll be the first to tell you, there's a bunch of dirty Republicans too. If the Republicans were clean, Trump's first term would have been way better than it was. And I think I think Trump is the best president of our lifetime based on what he has had to fight against to get anything done. And that includes his own party. But the difference between a conservative and a liberal, the liberal is always going to support the Democrat no matter what the Democrat does. They don't even think about it. It's just the Democrats support this, and I'm a stinking liberal, so I'm behind them. At least a conservative thinks for themselves. They will consider, is this policy right or is this policy wrong, or which side of this issue do I stand on? And if the Republicans are on the wrong side, a conservative is going to say so. He's not going to support them just because they got an R next to their name. That's the big difference between a Republican and a Democrat, is the conservative is willing to look at the issues. I think the biggest problem with this country is the two-party system. If we did away with the two-party system and everybody had to run on the issues, their side of the issue, this country would be way better off. And I know I've just lost a bunch of listeners because they don't like the political crap, but hey, it was a submitted question, so we'll get back to talking about deer hunting now.
It's been a while since you went on a political rant. People, if they can't tolerate it for a couple minutes, then we'll refund their money.
Yeah, we'll even double it.
Coming this February to the Michiana Event Center in Shipshewana, Indiana, the FAE Midwest Sportsman Classic. Thursday, February 13th through Saturday, February 15th. Come see the Whitetail Legends Classic with Bobby Worthington, Don Higgins, Al Foster, Joe Miles, Gene Winsell, Barry Winsell, and moderator Terry Peer.
We started shooting arrows. Here we are pushing 80 years old and we haven't put our toys away yet.
To say, like, these lights really brighten my eyes, and I know what the buck felt like that Don Higgins got last year right before he pulled the trigger.
When I got to hunting the whitetail deer later on, I realized I was hunting the #1 prey animal in the world, the most difficult animal in the world to kill. Before that week was over, my heart was broken because I found out they had a naked man in their room. True story.
Whitetail bucks aren't supposed to be easy. A mature whitetail buck, he's the top of the line. I mean, he's the top challenge in the archery world, and it's supposed to be a close range sport.
You know, I think that there's too many deer hunters out there that are trying to improve their success through their equipment instead of their woodsmanship skills.
Don't miss the Chasing Giants live podcast on Thursday night. Brian Dickinson, the author of Blind Descent, on stage Friday and Saturday. Mark Zona, the Hall of Fame angler, will be live on Thursday and Friday to show you how legends catch big fish. Also in this year's Unmatched speaker lineup, Terry Hodges, the legendary game warden and author of the thrilling Warden Force series. Team Radical on big game hunting and predator calling. Andy Andreas on fruit trees for wildlife. Smokey from Smokey's Deer Lures. And James Watson, Ross Robertson, and Mike Raber rounding out our next level fishing lineup. Thousands of dollars in attendee giveaways, guns, a double drop hunting blind, a fishing trip, Osseo camo, kayak, and more. Find a full show schedule at MidwestSportsmanClassic.com. Tickets available at the door. February 13th, 14th, and 15th. For more information, go to MidwestSportsmanClassic.com.
The next one comes from Beckham Pearson from Motley, Minnesota. It says, hey, Don, earlier in the year, I think I remember you talking about the need to harvest a dozen or so does off your property this year. Curious if you met your harvest goals and was wondering when in the season did you focus on thinning out the herd, or is it more when the opportunity presented itself? Can you discuss how you determine the number of deer you wanted to thin out while also considering the inflated late season numbers on your farms? Thanks for considering my question. Well, Beckham, I shot 8 does. Me and my guest shot 8 does on my property, and we shot 4 bucks. So we've killed 12 deer. That is probably more than double the number of deer that's ever been shot on this farm. I don't remember ever shooting more than about 5 or 6. And we've shot 12. I stopped shooting does because I was not seeing the larger herds that I was earlier in the year. I was originally going to shoot 10 and then look things over, and if I needed to, I'd shoot 12. If I needed to, I'd shoot 15. Well, when I got to 8, I was noticing that the number of deer that I was seeing around the farm had diminished from what it was. I know that I can always come back next year and shoot a dozen or 15 if I need to, but I didn't want to go too far. I've already went farther than I've ever gone, so I decided to stop there, and I'm not going to shoot another doe on the farm this year. But I wouldn't mind shooting another coal buck or two. I've got a couple in mind that if they come by, I would shoot them. But at the same time, under the conditions we got now, I hate putting pressure on this farm because, I've got all these deer staying here and they've got the prime food sources. If I run them off this farm, they're going to come back at some point, but they don't have anywhere else they can go where they've got the security cover and the food that they can find here on my place. So I like to really cut back on my intrusion in the winter. I typically do it after season, but this year we've got this weather systems that have come through before season ended, and we just haven't had that in several years. But so, yeah, to answer your question, I did not get what I had originally planned to, but it was by design. I mean, I could have easily went out there and shot 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 more does if I wanted to. I could have probably shot 2 or 3 this evening the way they was coming out. They was coming out in groups. I could have shot one and let the next group come out and shot another, but I think it's better to be conservative than to go overboard, and then you got to let the herd rebuild for a year or two. I'd like to get consistent on my harvest, so each year I know that, hey, I need to take 6 does every year, whatever it may end up, maybe 8 does every year, who knows, or even more than that. But I don't want to have these big swings where I kill a bunch of deer and I go overboard, and then for a couple of years I don't hardly shoot any, and then boom, I got to shoot a bunch again. I'd like to get more consistent on my doe harvest.
How many bucks did we shoot?
There's been 4 bucks shot here.
So
I shot one, you shot one, Wes shot one,
and your grandson
and Walker shot one.
Okay. So 12 deer total.
Yep.
Don, how does the use of thermal deer surveys help a land manager assess this? I was on a property helping in the hills of eastern Kentucky. It's mountains for those who don't know the topography. And a 600-acre farm had 119 total deer, and 13 of them were bucks when they did the deer survey. So we had a huge population and an out of whack population. How does using that technology, and what times of the year should people consider doing it to make these decisions?
Well, I think you can do it at various times of the year. It can tell you various things about your herd, because you do it now on a well-managed property, and you're going to have more deer here on your property right now than you're ever going to have at any other time of the year. You do it now on a poorly managed property, and you may not have a single deer there, where you had plenty back during the rut. So, I think a lot of it depends on the time of the year and what you're trying to accomplish. And doing it this time of the year can tell you a whole lot about your property management, because I wish that a lot of my clients would do a survey, in the winter before they hire me, or one of my guys, you, Wes, Bobby, whoever, and then a year or two after they've implemented our plan, come back and do another winter survey. And I know one of Wes Delk's clients, I think he was in Pennsylvania, did that. And the year before Wes was there, he had like 5 deer on his farm. Then he had Wes come in that winter, totally implemented the plan. The very next winter, just 1 year later, the guy had like some ridiculous number, like 60 at the same time. And it's basically about 2 things. It's about providing food when the deer need it the most, and it's also about good bedding cover. Because you could have great food, and if you don't have the bedding cover, those deer could be bedded over on your neighbor and coming to feed on your place at night. And that doesn't tell you much, but you want those deer feeding on your property, but you also want them bedded on your property. So I think the winter survey tells you a whole lot more about your overall management than at any other time of the year.
Yeah, it's I think it's a fantastic. I'm 100% against using them in season to track deer. I think it should be outlawed. I think it's criminal trespassing if you do it over somebody else's property. But I really think it's how do we draw the line, because it's such a vital tool. I mean, me going into that consulting job already knowing that I had a huge deer herd that I had to feed in the mountains, which is a tough task anyway, because there's not a flat spot to do any big plots. But then I had a buck to doe ratio that was crazy out of whack. Having that intel before you go in, I mean, that's huge.
Well, the other thing it can do is it can validate your efforts to create good bedding cover, because you do the survey before you start your habitat projects, and you see where those deer are bedded. And then you come back, after you've created, whether it's a TSI cut or a timber harvest or whatever, and you can see how you've affected where those deer are now bedding. And if you're doing things right, you should have some effect. You should be able to almost dictate where the deer bed on your property by, number one, the quality of the cover, the stem count, how thick that cover is, but also the freedom of human intrusion into those areas. You should be able to dictate pretty much where those deer bed on your property. You should be able to get them to bed where you want them to. And those thermal surveys validate whether you're correct or not.
And I know a lot of the guys that are doing thermal tracking, for wounded or deer that's been shot, they're doing them this time of year just to have another revenue stream, because tracking season's over and they have to pay for that drone. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know all the different people. I know we have somebody that helps us on Chasing Giants TV out in Missouri that does it. There's different people in the communities. I'm guessing that it's pretty cost effective to do it if you want it done this time of year when these guys aren't out tracking deer all hours of the night.
Yeah, I've had Jack Houston with Missouri Drone Recovery on my place a couple times doing surveys, and they've got their place and all. It's something that's really ripe for being abused. The whole drone thing. A drone in the hands of an ethical person is a good thing. A drone in the hands of an unethical person is absolutely a disaster. So, yep, we could say that about a lot of different things, though.
Yeah, I mean that goes across the board with everything.
It's like these thermal scopes these guys are using to hunt coyotes. If they're using them to hunt coyotes and they're an ethical hunter, that's great. But what happens when a giant buck steps out, or they scan a field and there's a giant buck out there? Do they have the integrity not to shoot that deer? And most of them do, but in the hands of an unethical person, that buck's probably going to get shot. Next question comes from Brandon G. from Alvaton, Kentucky. It says, after killing a few does this late season, I have a question about deer breeding. With humans, the lactation of a female basically makes her body not ovulate due to hormone influence. The does I've taken this year were still lactating. So does that mean that they are not able to conceive? If they are lactating during the rut, would that mean they would not come into heat and be able to be bred during that period? Would that be potentially responsible for late breeding cycles? Thanks for the input. No, Brandon, a doe is going to come into heat even if she's lactating. It's based on the daylight hours. It's no different than a cow. A cow is raising her calf, and she'll come back and heat and breed. Same thing with a deer. Has no influence at all. So as far as the late breeding cycle, I get a kick out of some of these so-called experts on social media that talk about the second rut, and I guess we're about ready to come up on the third rut, and probably have a fourth and fifth and sixth too before it's all said and done. But that late breeding is not because of lactating does that did not come into heat. It's mainly doe fawns. I promise you, 90% of late breeding activity is doe fawns. It's not a doe that did not get bred, because a doe comes into heat, she's going to get bred, and she's probably going to get bred, or the odds are really good that she's going to get bred by multiple bucks. So the odds of her not conceiving is very slim. The majority of that late breeding activity is doe fawns, and these doe fawns coming into heat, it's got nothing to do with any 28-day cycles. It's not like it happens 28 days after the main rut. It's very random. And I will say that in my opinion and experience, that there's more doe fawns bred in January and probably even early February than at any other time period, way more than there is in December. And a lot of it has to do with body weight. And, you know, as we get into winter and those fawns continue to put on weight, they get to about 80 pounds. And in the Midwest, that seems to be the magic number that will bring them into their first estrus cycle. But just want to stress that. All right, the next question comes from John Tabor from Marseilles, Illinois. It says, hello, Don and Terry. I'm wanting to make about 3 acres of row crop into switchgrass this spring. The designated area rubs up against a big timber section. My question is, would it be a good or bad idea to mix in Egyptian wheat with the switchgrass? As we know, switchgrass doesn't always grow fast, and if Mother Nature does not cooperate, it might not have a growing season that we all want. There will be miscanthus planted randomly within the switchgrass also. Thanks, and keep this great podcast going. Well, John, you do not want to plant Egyptian wheat or anything else in with that switchgrass. It will outcompete the switchgrass. It'll choke it out. Switchgrass is slow to establish, as you mentioned. It'll put on a lot of root, and when that seed, swells and cracks and germinates, that seed wants to put down root more than it does top growth. And when you get about an inch of top growth coming out of the ground on that switchgrass seed, that plant will have about 6 or 8 inches of root. It's really wanting to get that root established before it does the top. And what will happen is other vegetation, that top growth is so small that other vegetation will choke it out. And whether it be weeds or if you try to plant a cover crop, you mentioned Egyptian wheat. I've had guys, want to plant oats or something as a cover crop. You do not want to plant any kind of other crop with your switchgrass. It'll just outcompete it.
We had a question come in the other day. I'll spin this question the opposite way. If somebody has a property that has CRP on it and they need to terminate the switchgrass to put into row crop or a food plot, what's the best process to do that?
To get rid of switchgrass, first of all, you want to burn it in the early spring. Get rid of all that dead thatch and everything, and then let it green back up and let it get a good foot or so of growth. And then you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to spray it with a heavy dose of glyphosate. Don't skimp on the glyphosate. And I would use not the generic stuff. I'd go for the real deal. I would go for not the 41%. I'd go for the 53% Roundup Max or whatever they call it. And I'd use a full 2 quarts per acre. And then I would also use clethodim. Clethodim is a grass herbicide. Mixed in a good dose of clethodim, the maximum dose on the label, and then a surfactant. That surfactant will help this herbicide stick to that plant where the plant will absorb it better. And that combination seems to work the best. And then when you spray it, you're going to need to give it time to kill, because that, as I just discussed, that root system of that switchgrass is very deep. And that poison, that herbicide, needs to get way down in that root system to kill it. You can kill the top and you think it'll turn toast brown and you think that you've killed that switchgrass, and then you can go in and disc up the place or whatever, and what will happen is it'll still sprout back from that root that was not killed. So once you spray it, you need to give it a full month or so to work. And then once you've given it plenty of time to work, I would go in with a plow. A mold board plow is ideal, which will, turn the ground over. It'll cut that ground 6 inches or 8 inches below the surface and then flip it over. And you've cut that root system, and then disc it and plant your next crop. And you're still, even at that, you're still probably going to get a little bit of switchgrass coming back. But if you plant a Roundup ready crop, such as Roundup soybeans or Roundup ready corn, then you can come back and hit it again and set it back, another time. And typically that will take care of it, but it'll take multiple springs, and, it just takes time because of that dense root system.
Okay. Good questions. Last one for the night.
This one comes from Paul Sarita from Coal Valley, Illinois. It says, "Hello, Don and Terry. I hope the new year finds you guys doing well. Don, you recently talked about and released a video about cover cropping harvest salad into your corn. Next year, I plan on doing beans and then a fall cover crop. For the following year, if someone doesn't have the ability to do corn, would using sorghum be a good substitute every other year? Thanks for all that you two do." Paul, grain sorghum would be a fantastic option if you don't want to do corn. There's some advantages to that sorghum. One thing, it'll do better in a drier climate, like out in the plain states, for example. Or if we just happen to get a dry summer, that sorghum will do way better than corn will. You can plant that sorghum later. Early summer, you can plant that and get away with it. So, yeah, it's a good substitute. I'll throw out there that Real World does have a new sorghum blend this year. 3 different sorghums that we've tested. Actually, I think there was a social media post this week that someone had planted it this spring, and the deer were just hammering it in the snow. So I plan to have at least one sorghum plot on my place next year, and we'll overseed into it with the drone next fall with something as well.
Yeah, it's a great tool in rotations for people who can't take on corn. Corn's a little bit more finicky and different equipment, different inputs, but it's a great alternative. So, all right. Well, outside of what the weather does, what do you have planned for this upcoming week?
Well, I'm hoping to get some consulting visits in, but I'm going to need some cooperation from the weather.
Yep.
But how about you?
Well, I got to go to our good friends at 360, have a dealer day where all of their dealers from around the country are coming in to tour the factory, and they're having me come in and speak to that group of people and help with that, and then come back and try to get a bunch of stuff done. I got to leave for Japan 2 days after the event at Mount Hope. So wow. I thought those days were behind me, but I have to go to Japan for about 10 or 11 days, the end of the month into early February. So, yeah, we might have our first, actually, we can't say that because Joe Miles, the week that you were in the hospital, Joe Miles did one from Mexico. I can't say it's the first international podcast. We have to figure out how we're going to record that week. But yeah, so I got a bunch of stuff to get done before heading out of the country for a little bit. So try to get some consulting done, try to get some Lester's Feet stuff done. We got big plans that we're trying to get ready for the Shipshawana show and the Mountain Hope show. So we appreciate everybody's support on that. The website should be back up and running here shortly. We think we've figured out all of the problems with that. But yeah, it's been just such a blessing here the thing I like about the website being down for Lester's Feet, this is bad. I hate to say it this way, is it's really gotten us back to where we started with our podcast listeners are the ones that are connecting with these families versus just random people. And those people need help too. But that was kind of how this whole thing started, was this podcast connected people. And when we had issues with the website over the last few months, it got back to that. And that's what I think is so special about this.
Yeah, and we want to remind everyone that at that Shipshawana show, I don't remember what night it is, that we're going to have the Chasing Giants podcast. But during that, probably right before the podcast starts, I guess, we're going to auction off my bow, your bow, new Matthews bows from this year, and a set of my books that have been sold out for a couple of years now. But I'm going to set back a few copies of each for grandkids and such, and I'm going to pull one of each out, and we're going to auction them off. All proceeds going to Lester's Feet.
Yep. I talked to Derek. He's got a set time for when he's doing that and arranging an auctioneer. We'll announce when that's going to be when we have all the details about it. We got a big unveiling of a new product that's going to happen. Super secret. People don't have any clue what it is, but we've been working on this for a long time, and we're really excited about it. So it's just, I looked at the booth spaces for the Midwest Sportsman's Classic. Of course, all these booths are sold out. The Chasing Giants aisle last year was just on, like when you walked in the door on the right-hand side. Now it's the entire width of it. There's so many of our partners and different hunting companies that we have relationships with that it's taken up the whole length of that show. So it's really, really exciting to see everybody come together and go old school on a good hunting show. I'm excited about it.
It'll be a great show. Derek does a fantastic job. I talked to him a couple times this week, and he's the assistant editor of Whitetail Life magazine with me. So him and I work together on that. Of course, you and I help him with the show, and we actually got some things in the works. We may be working with Derek even more in the future. So
yep, we hope so. He's class act. I really appreciate him. So you got Sunday night prayer time this week. I don't know if you remember that or not, but you're on the schedule for this week, so you better get your sermon ready and get that to me before tomorrow so I can edit it, and stay tuned to the shocked look on its face says it all, folks. But
I had no idea.
We'll see you pull a sermon out of the bucket, as my dad used to say in the ministry. So stay tuned for Don's words of wisdom for this week's Sunday night prayer time after we're done, and we'll catch you next week.
I know what I'm going to be doing when I get off of here. God bless everyone. See you next week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey guys, welcome to the Sunday night prayer time. Hope you guys are all doing well and you weathered the storms we had this week. Don't know what you might have got in your area, but we got close to a foot of snow here, and I hadn't touched a snow shovel in about 3 years, and twice this week I've been on a skid loader. Once I was on it for almost 4 hours moving snow, and then today I was out on it again for about an hour and a half pushing snow. So if it doesn't snow again for the rest of the winter, I'll be fine. But I'm sitting here in my 360 blind, as you can see, and this is one of my favorite times of the year to hunt. Season's winding down. Deer are herded up around prime food sources, and you can typically see a lot of deer on a hunt this time of year, and a lot of other critters as well. The bad weather has all the animals on their feet, scavenging to find food, and it's just it's that period of time between fall when food sources are plentiful, and spring when everything replenishes. But just one of my favorite times to be out in the woods. And the last couple days I've had a couple days down from the consulting trail, and took full advantage of it by sitting in my blinds the last couple of evenings. But sitting here gives you a lot of time to reflect and think about a lot of things in life, not only deer hunting things, but spiritual things as well. And I kind of tie the two together. I'm just so ate up with hunting and the outdoors that it seems like everything that I do and think about ties back somehow to the outdoors. And this afternoon I was sitting here thinking about something that happened to me several years back. It's probably been 15, 20 years ago now, when I was a freelance outdoor writer and putting out a lot of articles, a lot more than I do today. And I wanted to write an article for the Matthews annual magazine. Back in the day, Matthews would put out an issue of, I forget what they called it, Matthews bow hunting or something. And in the box with every new bow, you would get this magazine, and then Matthews dealers would have them stacked up there on their counters as well. But I tried to write a few articles for that magazine over the years, and I approached him one year with this idea that I wanted to interview Matt McPherson, who basically is the founder of Matthews Archery, because I learned a lot of things that Matthews was doing behind the scenes that nobody really knew about at that time. And, you know, some missionary work that they were doing, just humanitarian things around the globe. And I wanted to share that. And the title of the article that I ended up writing was The Matthews You Never Knew. And, you know, I detailed things like, well, they were digging water wells in these third world countries. And, you know, the native people would come to those water wells to get their drinking water. And then Matthews would plant a missionary there. So when these people would come to get their water, you know, Matthews had a missionary there sharing the gospel with them. And I remember trying to get an interview with Matt was almost like trying to get an interview with the President of the United States. I mean, I had to jump through some hoops and go through a chain of people to get approved for this. And, you know, once I was approved to interview him, I had to basically share the questions I was going to be asking, and, you know, what this was about. And then I was given a date and a time, and I had to make myself available. So when I did finally get Matt on the phone, it was an absolute pleasure to get to talk to him. But he said something that really stuck with me, and to this day I still kind of live my life by that principle. And I want to share it with you because I think it has merit, and I think you could probably use it in your life as well. And I found that the more I follow that scripture that he shared, the more blessed I've been. And the scripture was, to whom much is given, much is also expected. And he went on to explain that he's lived his life by that principle or scripture, and that you know, he feels that the more he is blessed, the more his company is blessed, the more he can bless others, the more he can do to build the kingdom. And I've tried to follow that philosophy myself, you know, not only with my personal businesses with Higgins Outdoors and the consulting and all the things that I've done over the years there, but, you know, also with Real World Wildlife Products. You know, everything that I make in either business, I tithe, you know, 10%, and then I try to go above and beyond with, you know, other humanitarian things, and, you know, just being a good steward of what I've been given. And there's a saying that you can't outgive God, and I've just come to realize that is so true, because it seems like the more I give to others, the more I try to do my part to spread the gospel, the more I'm blessed. And it's like, if I'm a good steward of a little bit, then he's going to give me more. And I don't know if you guys live your life that way or not, but it certainly worked very well for me. It's worked very well for Matt McPherson and Matthews Archery. And, you know, I've had some of Matt's employees over the years tell me that in their meetings, their company meetings, Matt will say things like, you know, the more that we make in terms of finances, the more we can help others. And he's not motivated by the money, he's motivated by what he can do with the money. And it's a philosophy that I'm telling you, it works. Again, it's probably 15, 20 years ago when I had that conversation with Matt McPherson. I'm sure he probably doesn't even remember it, but it really stuck with me, and to this day, I continue to live by that philosophy. To whom much is given, much is also expected, or much is also required. And guys, if you're not living your life that way, I encourage you to do so. Always be thinking about how you can help others. And I've come up with a saying myself that Terry and I have shared on the podcast a few times, and that is, if you want to be blessed, be a blessing. When you bless others, it's going to come back to you somehow. It may just be that good feeling, in your heart that you was able to help someone, but it may come back in a number of other ways. So I just encourage you to think about that, and if you're not living your life that way now, maybe consider it. So with that message, I'm going to end with prayer here. Hopefully have some deer show up when I get done. The day's winding down. Got about half hour, 40 minutes of shooting light left. So I'll wrap this up, and hopefully you get to shoot a deer when it's all said and done. So, Father God, I just ask that you be on the hearts of everyone that's listening to this Sunday night prayer time, that you take care of their needs. Everyone's struggling with something, it seems, whether it be finances or health issues or relationships with people or whatever it may be. I just ask that you touch all of the listeners. I thank you for each and every person that supports the Chasing Giants podcast. Please bless them, bless their families, and just guide and direct us in all that we do so that it's pleasing to you. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.